All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Chelsea. I'm going to take over as Master MC for Lene tonight. Just a few announcements and housekeeping things before we kick it off to Kate. You are here for the competitive candidate. We're going to have a 90-minute workshop. If you're not here for that, you're in the wrong class. No, just joking. That was terrible. I just always wanted to say it. All right. So we are Denver UX newbies. Thank you for being here. We are co-organized by myself and Lene and Ryan. If you have any feedback for tonight's event or any of our other events or want to talk, please reach out to one of us on Slack or LinkedIn or here. We'd love to hear from you. Gonna plug our next event. It's gonna be an AMA with Paul, and that's gonna happen in Slack on Thursday. So instead of hopping on Zoom, we're gonna try a little different format. If you are not in the Denver UX Slack, you'll need to join that group and then hop in the Denver UX Newbies channel and then tag Paul. And he's gonna hop on between 1 and 2 on Thursday and answer your questions. He's a researcher, but I think has experience in all UX design. So send him your questions. Our next event, real event, Zoom event, evening event is going to be March 23rd with Jackie Smith. She's a principal product designer at Omnicell. She's going to be the title, obviously passion led me here, but what will my UX job entail? She's going to talk about just kind of like the day-to-day and what to expect when you get your first job and kind of how that changes throughout your career, depending on how you specialize or not. Also, if you were here last month, we announced that if you came over into our Slack channel, introduced yourself, we were gonna draw a few winners to win some books. Adobe XD sponsors us, and since we haven't been able to have live events, we've had some money just kind of burning a hole in our pockets. So Sarah and Allie, I will reach out to you on Slack. We have a little wish list of some of our favorite like UX related books, but if you have something else that's been on your book wish list, send it my way and I will send it to you. We're gonna give away another one on Thursday. So if you ask Paul a question, we'll do the same thing, grab everybody's name and send out a winner that we'll announce at the March event. That's all of that. I wanna get into tonight and introduce Kate. She's going to be doing a 90-minute kind of jam workshop to help you look at all of your skills, align them in a way that makes sense with some of these vague job descriptions. We're going to kind of learn how to decipher those a little bit more and then turn that into like a pitch that you can start using today to help you navigate your job search. Kate is a nursing school dropout turned UX researcher, and she founded Element Experience Labs, which focuses on providing education, coaching, consulting for individuals and teams to grow their UX research practice. She knows a ton. We've seen a small sneak peek of tonight. And I think this information applies to everybody. So we're really excited to welcome her. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Kate.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for that, Chelsea, and all of the Denver UX newbies group. You guys have been really awesome in coordinating this together. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully it goes better than the last time that I tried to share my screen. And we're going to dive right on in. Can everyone see? Should say positioning your power. I can't see the chat, so if someone could use words, thank you. Awesome, great. Okay, so I'm going to just get myself organized here. So Chelsea already did a great job introducing me. As she mentioned, that's kind of my own pitch is I dropped out of nursing school and a few years later stumbled into UX, and here we are. So just a few things kind of about me. I am a sucker for starting things I don't like to finish. And I live in Philadelphia with my very furry roommate, Watson. And together we do UX research all the time, all day, every day. It's a lot of fun. So just in case you missed it in the job or in the title and in Chelsea's description, this is a workshop. So this is something that we're going to be doing a lot of activities for. We're going to be diving in a little bit, doing some work. So if you haven't already, if you're old school, grab some pen and paper, or you can find a Google Doc, and then you'll need something to like write or highlight with. Could be the same pen, whatever, it's your life. A job description. If you don't have one right off of hand, like just run to LinkedIn or wherever you find your quality and not so quality job descriptions and just pull one down. It doesn't have to be like match your desire spot on, but it's going to help when we do some of these exercises. And the last little bit here, so I like to say put your distractions in a drawer or like wherever, but this is interactive, and if you miss, and then it builds on each other. So if you just check out for a part of it, it's not going to make sense when we bring it all together at the end. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. Yeah, hope we're ready to get fancy with it. Okay, so this is the plan. We have our four sections, and as you can see, there's minimal lesson time, and then we have twice as much, if not more, jam time. So we will be spending some time heads down. We're not going into breakout rooms. This will just be individual. So don't like stress out if you weren't prepared to meet people tonight. Totally fine. We're not going to force you into that today. So these are the four different parts that we're going to be looking at. So first is this concept of a life in review. So a lot of our experiences and a lot of our soft skills and traits tend to evolve from repeating patterns of either decisions that we've made or just things that have happened to us that's resulted from any kind of decisions or choices. And it's really telling when you start putting them all together, you can pull all of these super cool traits out of them. So we're going to take a look at that. And then from there, we're going to do what we call a skills inventory. So we'll be going through the 5 different types of skills, from all the way from the hard skills to the super soft, subjective, what they call fluffy skills, which I think are the most important, but we'll go into that when we get there. And then we're going to explore job descriptions. So a big reason from the few of you that I've talked to who brought this workshop up to me, they were like, I'm just really excited to go through this job descriptions, because half the time I don't even know what they're asking for, and they use vague words and like kitschy lingo, and you're not wrong. UX job descriptions are some of the worst job descriptions on the planet, and we're going to just walk through some of the buzzwords, the lingo, and essentially how to read through the lines to figure out what it is they're actually asking for. Because you can't apply or put forth a strong application without actually knowing what their problem is and how you're going to solve it. And that's exactly what we're going to do with this aligning your assets. So we're going to bring it all together. So your life experiences, your skills, the application of those skills, and pair that with what we've deciphered from the job description and pull it all together. And we'll create these things called solution statements. They're going to help you really hone in on those pain points that the hiring manager is looking for, and positioning yourself as like the ideal candidate for the job. So it's a lot, and this was originally designed to be a multi-week program. So we're going to condense it in 90 minutes, do the best that we can, and make it happen. All right. So first lesson, a life in review here. Okay, so like I mentioned before, life moments, especially those that we're in control of, expose these traits, habits, and behaviors that come naturally to us. So how we behave in times of stress, how we behave when we're relaxed, when things happen, when things are going good, how we respond to that, and then how we respond to things when things aren't going so great. is really helpful for us to identify those traits. And this is the very beginning of exposing those soft skills. We hear the term empathy a lot in UX, like so much. Like if I had $1 for every time I heard empathy and I'm empathetic, I would be a very rich woman. But I would not bet it on Bitcoin because that is ridiculous. Anyways, so what we're also looking at is how you're using these soft skills almost passively in the real world. So these are some big promises, but when we go through the exercise, you'll start to see the kind of the connections and what we're thinking about. So this is definitely more a reflection-based exercise. And I'm going to walk you through an example because this is a little high level, and just to kind of walk you through how we're thinking about this. So this is a real world example. So sophomore year of college, I started a medical nonprofit organization pairing nursing students with Cleveland Clinic doctorates to bring accessible maternal health care to rural Ghana. Okay, that's a big statement. It's a huge statement, but this is the statement that got me my first job in UX, even though it has nothing to do with UX, period. But having this statement, understanding what that statement actually means to me and what it demonstrated and the decisions I had to make to get there was my selling point. That was exactly how I was able to convince somebody that I could show up in a UX role, even though I had just dropped out of nursing school. So it demonstrated leadership, coordination, collaboration, sales. And these are so those are like your more like stereotypical, like, okay, skills. But then we kind of move into more of the applicable things, like the ability to mobilize organizations in the direction of the greater good. That's a huge statement, but there's actual proof that I was able to show up in that. Ability to identify a need from multiple parties and create a program that solved for multiple problems in a single solution. That's your UX like gold statement. Like that's what UX is. It's like, how do we understand problems? Can we see the problem? And then how do we create a solution for the problem? And so finding these things in our life that actually apply those principles and those concepts, it's really encouraging when you're talking to a hiring manager, like, hey, this is what you're looking for, but this is how I showed up and in a way instead, even though it's not traditionally the answer that they're looking for, but if you can connect the dots, that's all that matters. So we're going to dive right on into our first exercise. So what you're going to do is create in your Google Doc, Google Sheet, notebook, whatever it is that you have, you're going to make 3 columns, or even 2 columns, whatever, use this as a cheat sheet. And what we're gonna look at is the top 2 or 3 kind of big events or things that you decided to do or pursued or played around with from early childhood all the way to where you are now. And you can keep going on the list, whichever ones are relevant for you. You're going to list the event, and it can be super short. We're not telling a story here. That will tell itself when we put it all together. And then we're explaining why was it significant or meaningful? Like, how did it change the way that you thought about things? What did it reveal about yourself to others? What did it reveal about yourself to you? So keep in mind, once again, things that you decided to do or you are in control of that revealed something about you. So we're gonna take 10 minutes and go heads down. This is not the time to pull out our phone or check our email. We're gonna go all in for the next however many minutes. And yeah, so I don't know if someone wants to either play some jams or set a timer, if that's available. But I'm gonna let, sweet. And I'm gonna set a timer right now, and for 10 minutes, go.
Hey, Kate, we've got a couple of clarifying questions in the comments. Can you give a little voiceover of what we're supposed to be focusing on here?
For a second, it wouldn't let me get off mute. Yes, so to Laura, it's essentially anything, any moment in your life that you can think of that revealed something about you. So maybe you started a club or picked up a new hobby. And whatever that is, it's like, why did you pick up that hobby? Because maybe you were curious. Okay, well, it explores that, like it reveals that you're curious, and that's kind of the element that we're looking at, right? So essentially anything in your life that helps kind of develop you into who you are. Does that make sense? Maybe.
Well, if you're speaking, you're probably on mute.
Okay.
Is there anything that we should stay away from? Like, is anything off limits or not going to help us very much?
I feel like if you, once we go through, like once you start thinking about it, it's kind of hard to explain, right? Where it's not necessarily things that either happen to you. They're more so things that you chose to do or you are in control of. Something you chose to stop doing, something you chose to start doing, and it could be personal or professional. Does that help?
Helps me.
Cool.
And we got an okay thank you in the chat, so we're good. How much time do we have left?
We have about 5 minutes, but I just want to do a gut check. How are we feeling? Do we need more time? Are we vibing? Are we over it?
I'm just listing the biggest things that come off the top of my head. So that's basically it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, absolutely. And this exercise is something you can always go back to dive in just a little bit deeper.
Most of what we're getting in the chat is more time, please.
Okay,
so.
Cool. Yeah, it's definitely a new way of thinking. We don't always put ourselves through this kind of exercise. So it's good for you. Give it about 2 more minutes. All right. So wherever you are, just wrap up and remember, you can always come back to this and keep going when we're done. This is something that you shouldn't just do one time. This entire exercise is something that is really good to just check in with yourself as well, you know, every now and again. So, so what we're going to do next is we're going to go through your, like, what you came up with for, like, why was this significant? How was this meaningful? And then what we want to do is try to think about, what is this revealing about us? And I don't want you to think about, like, what does it say about me as a professional? Just think, what is the trait or what is the trend that you're starting to see as you're looking at all of these different events and these reactions that you've had throughout your life in a very small nutshell.
Yes.
And so with that, let's give you about 3 to 4 minutes thinking about that. What is this revealing about me? How did this moment, like, change the way I think about things? Maybe you had a shower epiphany, whatever it may be. Those are the kinds of things I want you to start thinking about. And then we'll take that, stick a pin in it, and we'll come back to it in the next section. So I'm going to give you about 3 to 4 minutes to just kind of go through your events, take a second and just sit with it, kind of figure out, what is it saying about you? All right, I'm setting the timer now.
Okay, while we're jotting down, we had a question in the chat. Is it okay for the events to be negative?
Absolutely, and I just responded to that. So you can absolutely add negative events if you think that it revealed something about yourself that was helpful, that's helpful to who you are now. And
Because ultimately you're going to spin this, right, in a positive manner, right? With
pretty much, yeah.
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 So negative can be included that because you learned something from it.
Absolutely. It's all about the story behind it.
Can I ask you a quick question, Kate?
Go for it.
So I'm picking up, this exercise is really like, because so many jobs now, they're really fundamentally looking for if the job is a fit to your person, right? Whether it's your personal life or and really your professional life, and a mix of the two, correct? So that's why this exercise becomes really useful, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
And it's not just a fit, but it's also like understanding like where your strengths are, and it's a fit for, if it's a fit for you versus you trying to always be a fit for the other group,
Yeah.
the other party. Mm-hmm.
That's good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So is
All
one
right.
of the reasons you didn't post like everything that we're doing tonight part of that discovery, that you don't want to like disclose the next part because you don't want to like have us think about it differently?
I'm not sure if that was something that is something you guys normally do.
No, I'm just one of those people that likes to like know the whole process ahead
yeah.
of time.
Yeah. It's got a little bit of an organic flow to it. So
Okay.
you gotta kind of hang on and you gotta trust me. But
That's cool. I was just curious.
I was almost gonna say I empathize with that, but I couldn't.
Christina,
All right.
I'm trying to work ahead.
Awesome. All right. So very excited to see / hear what you guys come up with. If it's okay, I would love for any brave soul to share an example of the event and what you learned from it, and then the trait that it revealed. So how we're going to do this is in the chat. If you're interested in sharing, just say me, and we'll have one of our facilitators call on folks.
I think facilitator, that sounds like me.
Yeah, that might be
Patrick,
you.
you were the first one. Do you want to share with us one of your events?
Sure. It was way back when I was a kid, which is a really long time ago, where I was really good at soccer, and so I was on a team where we were champions of the city. And why it was meaningful to me was that I remember embodying the feeling of being focused, confident, and I knew we as a team could not be beaten. Like, we just weren't going to be beaten. It was a foregone conclusion, not like ego. It's just like we practiced and we did what we needed to do. And so I think the traits, I was just starting to write down traits of that, which was, I think that was a willingness to listen, a willingness to work, and the willingness to be part of a team. And it also wasn't like I was winning. We collectively had this feeling.
That's awesome. And do you see that like feeling or that energy anywhere else kind of now later on in your career?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's something I fall right into. I recently finished a Techstars contract, and I immediately could fall into when leadership wasn't being able to dial in when leadership was needed or my voice was useful, and then dialing back when I was getting a little too. I've learned that gear beyond this soccer thing, that I can dial up and dial back.
And that's awesome. And that was a solid example. So thank you for that. And that's the power of like taking yourself back a little bit and thinking, because oftentimes we're just like, I'm not good enough for this job, right? Like, how many times do we look at a job description and we look at years of qualification and we're just like, I'm out. So it's really good to start thinking about yourself as so much more than that, because then you can approach a job application from a place of abundance versus a place of scarcity. And it makes you look like a much more robust person. And you are a much more robust person than a job description. And this is what this is starting to help us think about and integrate into our resumes, portfolios, etc. Let's take one more.
Next up is Autumn Jones.
Hello. This was really fun. Just so you know, I'm gonna start. Do you want my event or my takeaway? But
Start with your events, and then essentially your why was it meaningful and what you learned from it. So what was your trait that you learned about yourself from it?
well, when I was a very young kid, I went around the neighborhood with index cards to babysit, and I was 11. And my sister did it, and then my friend did it, but I was sort of entrepreneurial, and I used to put on carnivals in our backyard, which had games like the Midway at the fair. I liked my dad was kind of an inventor, and I worked on a lot of products with him. And I always was into drawing. And also, when I was in 5th grade, I did the March of Dimes walk, where you walk 20 miles and raise money. And back then, 20 miles was a long way, not like now. But anyway, I initiated all of that on my own, and I was entrepreneurial. I was curious. I was always looking up things. I mean, this is pre-internet. So we had dictionaries and encyclopedias.
So
But-
I'm going to pause you there because there are so many good things. Like how would you describe, like, what are your key takeaways, like the traits that you're seeing in yourself now that those events either inspired or are highlighting?
Initiative or self-starter, tenacity. I'll stay in the game. I've always been curious. I've been called that many times. I work hard.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's amazing. And that's exactly the kind of things those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. And we're going to be applying that to our next bit, which is actually, grand reveal, our skills inventory. So take what you've collected from your life in review. And these are really great examples. So it's a really bright group. So I'm pretty sure the rest of us are probably on the similar track. If you're still really lost, please let me know. But we're going to be essentially turning these skills right now. We're going to be collecting them and then providing some real world context around these different attributes. So we're going to do a little crash course on when someone says skills or upskill or just throws skills around. It's really important to understand that there is a spectrum of skills that go from hard skills to soft skills. And so just want to take a brief moment, talk about these, and just provide any clarity around what it means to have these skills. So first of all, just wanted to clarify, there's a difference between skills and traits. So what we just looked at is a list of traits, and those are really important, and they actually help us define our skills or the things that we might be naturally good at with help and practice. But the key difference between a trait and a skill, so a trait is something that you're born with and that you have a natural, like a knack for. A skill is essentially the exercising of a trait or ability for a specific outcome. And that's the big takeaway between a trait and a skill. And that's really important to understand when people say I'm empathetic and they list it as a skill, which it is, but it has to achieve a specific outcome. Like you have to be able to do something with it in order for it to become a skill. All right, so keeping that in mind, we have tools, super straightforward. These are your most tangible skills, so to speak. So we have your tools. This could be software. This could be a physical tool. Doesn't really matter. But it can also be a body of knowledge. So say you actually made it through nursing school. You would have a really good idea of like the human body. That's a skill, like having a body of knowledge that you can use to get a specific outcome. List it. The other third thing that falls under this list is our languages. So if you speak any languages outside of English, even coding languages, those would fall under tools. And then we have craft skills. And this is the doozy that no one talks about, but everyone is asking for. Craft skills are how you apply the tools to get the job done. I'm gonna repeat that again. The craft skills is how you apply the tools to get the job done. We're gonna go into that quite a bit in the exercise below, but we're not gonna get there quite yet. We have operational skills, so time management, project management, scoping. And that's a fun skill that I'm convinced no one actually has. So threw that on the list. Then you have people skills, and these are skills that are required to interact effectively and engage with people other than yourself. So interacting and engaging effectively outside of yourself. And then we have self skills that are skills required to interact and effectively engage with yourself. Whoa. So what we mean by that are things like discipline and flexibility and like biohacking, which it's kind of a conspiracy, but whatever, like take your vitamins, whatever. So using, understanding the variety of different skills is really important to not just understand like where you stand, but it helps you think about being what we call like the total package. So having a balance of skills will help us, first of all, like it shows that we're self-aware. It shows that we know how to engage with people in a way that's appropriate and helpful in the job context and outside of the job context. And then we also know our stuff. Like we know what we need to show up with and how to apply it.
Okay.
So that's the skill spectrum. There are a lot of examples. There are a lot of articles out there for examples. So if you're ever curious, take a look. I've yet to figure out like what the actual word for the craft skill is, but put it on there anyways. So now we're going to go back to our paper, notebook, Google Doc, whatever it is. You're going to make 2 columns. So column 1, you're going to list out your skills, and I'm going to bring the chart back up here in a second, so you'll have it to reference. But you'll have the skill, but in column B, what I want you to do is list in order to. So this is what did you do with it to what outcome? So for example, I have Google Analytics on here. Super straightforward skill. You can take a couple-week course on it, be an expert, it's fine. But it's the application. This is us showing our craft ability, right? So how have we actually applied a skill to achieve a certain end? So the example, Google Analytics, in order to analyze in-depth detail about the visitors on my client's website to identify key market segments and inform the content strategy. It's super clear, it's super crisp. You don't have to question like, okay, so you know Google Analytics, now what? The last thing that hiring managers want to see is a list of skills with no evidence of showing how you actually used it. And so the way we can best honor our skills is to explain and show how we've exercised those skills in the past, because it gives them an idea of how you can apply it in the future. So we're going to take about, I'm going to say 7 minutes. We're going to start with 7 minutes and see if we need more time. And I'm going to pull this chart back up in a second. And yeah, go ahead and list your skills and how you use them.
Kate, this is really interesting because one of the best advice I ever got for how you actually write your bulleted statements for your work experience for every job was very similar to this exercise. And it was basically you take your action verb, right? And then next it's what did you do with what? And then what was the business result? So it's very similar and it's extremely effective.
Absolutely. I'm not going to say spoiler alert, but I would say hang on to your hat till we get to the end. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop us a few minutes early because I just looked at the clock for the first time. So this is a really good exercise to continue doing on your own. Does anyone have an example that we can run through real fast? We'll do it the same way. Just save me in the chat and Ryan will call on somebody.
Sonia was on it.
Oh, so on it. All right, let's go.
Hello all, Sonia here. So one of the ones that I had was tools. I'm a little older, I'm 41. So for me, it would be work experience. I've observed a lot of stuff going on, you know, how things are really inefficient, there's bad communication. And so I basically use my observations of my work history to see where things fail and see how they can be better. And I have a graphic design background, so I kind of use some of that to, you know, design forms, facilitate things, make things run more efficiently, because I have like this obsession with it. So for me, it's about how can we make this run fast and quick and get things done right the first time, and just make
so
it
I
work.
challenge you then, how would you say that in one sentence?
I wrote down, this helps me solve problems with organization and communication based on observations of behavior and systems. I don't know if that's too vague.
Can you read it one more time?
Sure. This helps me solve problems with organization and communication based on observations of behavior and systems.
Yeah, I think that's great. I would probably just say this helps me. I would just get rid of that and just keep the in order too. Yeah. Yeah, and anytime you're writing a resume or a cover letter, the more times you say I or my, the less detached the reader is going to get. It's no longer about their objectives and goals. It starts to sound like it's all about you. And so the fewer times you could use that, that's actually going to be really helpful.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. Okay, we'll take one more.
Okay, the next person volunteer was Kara Goldberg.
Cool.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. Okay, so I did client relations was my skill because I come from a sales background. In order to grow sales revenue by establishing repeat business and increasing referrals.
Okay, awesome. Straightforward to me.
Okay.
All right. Cool. So there's one last piece to this. We're not going to go ahead and do this. This is something you can go do on the side, but add a column to the right and then indicate which category of skill that your skill falls under. And that way you start to look, as I mentioned before, you want to present yourself in a balanced way. And so by understanding what your top self skills are, what your top operational skills are, and what your top, just go through the spectrum, whatever those top skills are, you can actually incorporate each of your best ones from the whole spectrum into your resume, into your cover letter, into your interviews and the way that you talk about them. And it's subtle, but it's something that it's felt, it's not really noticed, if that makes sense. So reading a resume that highlights self skills and highlights like prioritizing each skill independently or together of each other, it just feels good. It's like, okay, this person gets it. And that's what we're shooting for, right? So being able to communicate the things that we have and being able to package them in a way that makes sense to the hiring manager. So what does the hiring manager actually want, guys? Buckle up. This is one where I will probably be talking at you a little bit more, so my apologies, but this is really good, juicy stuff. We will take a few breaks to do some reflection questions, but for the most part, take some notes. Some of this might sound familiar to you. Some of it may be familiar with an interesting twist, so I really hope that it does add value. But so we have this gigantic list of skills. You're aware of, some of your traits and the things that you bring to the table as a human being, not as a job prospect, but as a person. But I'm sure, as you can tell by looking at your lists are way longer than what you're going to fit on a resume or a cover letter or a portfolio. And you don't want to, because then it detracts from the things that you're actually trying to say. So the question being, how do we actually figure out what it is that the hiring manager needs? And the trick with this is, when a hiring manager writes a job description, hopefully it's the hiring manager writing the job description. It isn't always, and you can usually tell, but it's essentially an order form. And the more clear the order form is, pretty exciting to see. But that usually doesn't happen. There tends to be a lot of vague, ambiguous lingo that exists. We've all seen it. And this is the part where we're going to be going through and understanding how can we read through the lines and understand what the actual problem is that the hiring manager has that they're trying to hire you for. And then we can understand what kind of skills and experiences and traits that we need to incorporate in order to position ourselves as a solution to this specific problem that they have. So let's do this. This is a job description. I pulled it off the internet. It's pretty straightforward. We're going to be diving into it. It's for a UX and a senior UX researcher for Patreon. For those of you who don't know what it is, you will know because it's in the overview. There are 4 big parts of the job description. So it's the overview, pretty straightforward. The responsibilities should be pretty straightforward. The qualifications, and then the preferred qualifications, as if qualifications wasn't clear enough. But what's the difference between a qualified qualification and a preferred qualification? It's fine. So we're gonna dive right on in. So we have the first section, the overview. So this is either the description, the role, sometimes it's called about us, it's called a bunch of different things. This is typically your summary of the company and or the role. But what it tells us in so many words is the problem or what need exists. And it's not like, oh, we have an opening for a UX researcher or we have an opening for a designer. That's not, obviously there's an opening because there's a job description. What we need to know is why. Why are they hiring now versus any other time? And why are they hiring this specific role? What kind of job are they trying to accomplish? So that's what helps us understand, like if we can understand what inspired this job description, then we can start to position ourselves in a really good way. It also gives us some, hopefully, some context of the role itself. So here's an example. So this is from the previous job description I just showed you. This one is a little different. It's kind of weird, but we've seen weirder things. This is a joint job description for both an associate UX researcher and a senior UX researcher. And I'm going to help us kind of decipher which points actually go to which role because they don't actually tell you. So that's kind of cool. But what we're going to do is we're going to take 3 minutes. Here's to my speed readers and kind of just read through the overview one time and then hop into these reflection questions. You can either write this down or just kind of think about it. But these are going to be consistent reflection questions of how we're going to analyze the other 3 portions of this job description. So I'll give you 3 minutes starting now. Feel free, read through it, then read the reflection questions, then read through it again with those reflection questions in mind.
Sorry, where are the reflection? I don't know where this is.
Oh, I'm so sorry. There we go. I was on the wrong slide. All right, so let's refer that. Thank you for calling that out. Appreciate that, Autumn. Okay, so this is the job description and the overview, and then we have the reflection questions at the bottom. And I'll reset our time. 30 more seconds, wrap up any thoughts. All right, so there's a lot in there. There's also not a lot in there. We're going to focus probably just on the pain points and needs for right now. Ideally, I would love to kind of go through the other questions, but time, it's ridiculous. So let's just think about what pain points exist for Patreon. What are their needs overall, and what are some of their needs for this role? And so some of them are literally stated, and some of them not so much. So maybe in the chat, if you could list the top pain points that you're seeing and the needs that you're seeing emerge just from this one overview. Also, this is not the time to roast this job description, so we'll do that on the next slide, but just focusing on what the pain points and the needs are. Good, so fast growth brings pain, yes. Pain point, growth, need more researchers to deal with more users. Experiencing large growth, yep. They have a product team with holes. Cross-cultural issues. Miscommunication amongst teams, it's interesting. Teams need help making decisions, cool. Yeah, so I think between most of these, you guys nailed it. So there's a lot of growth, but the one thing that kind of stood out to me was this idea of support this level of growth. And oftentimes when you come into a company that has experienced a lot of explosive growth, there's usually an understanding that things need to change, but a fear to change because what they've done so far has worked. And so that's something where trying to position ourselves in a way where we can say, hey, you know, we've come into these like high intense moments, but we also like can show up, do the work on day one without rocking the boat too much. That's something that could actually work in your favor if that's something that you think about, and that's something that you can acknowledge in a conversation with a hiring manager. Like, wow, like this growth is amazing. Like, it's really exciting that you're doing this. And also, I'm sure you have a lot of these concerns. That's the kind of conversation that reading the job description and like taking a moment to think about what that actually means for the hiring manager is going to help you to do. So just think about that as we go through more of these. For the sake of time, we're going to move on to my favorite. This is where we get to roast the job description. It's essentially pulling out these like terminology, vague things that exist and understanding what they actually mean. Because a lot of times these job descriptions can be very vague. And as I'm going to try not to roll my eyes while I say it, but as empathetic people, we tend to mirror as a means to help. That's just who we are, like our human nature. We will mirror someone else's action towards us. It doesn't work with job descriptions. So if they throw something really vague at you, they're expecting to hear exactly what it is that they want to hear, but couldn't articulate on paper. So that's something to think about as we're going through this. So the point of going through these buzzwords is helping you to create a strategy for creating some specificity around these concepts and terms. So for example, like we had already talked, like support this level of growth. What does that actually mean? What does supporting growth mean? Well, it means that you can effectively and efficiently do your job at a fast pace. It's probably going to be a little bit of an ambiguous environment. What does that mean? Things are going to be a little nuts. You may not have someone to report to, or you have multiple people to report to and it changes. Just understanding that you can be calm in the storm, any kind of example that you can provide for that, solid. A strong foundation in. So this is applicable if you're talking about UX research, UX designers, doesn't matter. So it's, what does a strong foundation mean? How can we actually demonstrate that we have a strong foundation in? Well, go back to your skills sheet, take a look. What kind of methods did you list under your skills list? Okay, so you have 4 or 5 like really cool methods or hard tools or soft skills that you can apply to this instance. But if they're asking for a strong foundation, you better be ready to give them specific examples for what that is. Flexibility. What does that mean? It means don't get too attached to your work or the scope or the plan, and always have a backup plan. Like show that you can show up with a backup plan. That's usually how you can answer to this concept of flexibility. Plan Bs go a long way. The ability to help teams drive towards decision making. It is not your job to make decisions for your team. As a researcher, it's not your customer's job to make decisions for your team, but what you can do is give them the right information so they can make informed decisions. In UX research, that's insights and recommendations. In design, that's best practices. That's also research that they've done either on their own or have looped a UX researcher in to help with. That's what they're looking for. What kind of information can you dig up to inform your team? Eager collaborator. Eager really gets me. It's less about how eager are you and it's more about, are you able to, and give me an example. And usually that means, here is the size and a makeup of a team that I worked on, and that also responds to your cross-culturally and cross-functionally. I think I saw a question in there referring to all these like design, data science, all of these. I think it was more referring to being able to speak and work with them versus actually having to do their jobs. But that's also a really good question to ask in an interview. Like, how much of this are you actually expecting us to do? Do these people even exist? Which is also a really good question to ask, because sometimes they don't, and they're still working on building that up. So just super high level of what those are and how I would approach addressing those with specific examples. All right, moving on to part 2 of the job description. So these are the responsibilities. They're also called a day in a life, or what you will do, etc. So they're sometimes mixed in the qualifications, so just kind of keep an eye out. But I think this was actually just mentioned before. There is a formula, right, for what this is. And it's literally what we just did in our skills assessment. It's the skill in order to do that resulted in what. And that's a pretty good indicator of what you're going to have to do, or essentially achieve it. So I would say focusing on the outcome is going to be your saving grace when it comes to if they're asking for a skill you don't have, but you're able to get to that outcome in a different way. It really helps you get around a lack of experience in something that's specifically being asked about. And so why do we care about this? Like I mentioned, you know, by understanding what's needed in the day-to-day, we can strategically demonstrate how we've already performed those similar responsibilities, indicating to the hiring manager that you can, here's another buzzword, hit the ground running. So as long as you can show how you can get to specific outcomes, it's going to indicate that you can definitely add value to the team faster. And that's the piece that is a really solid selling point. All right, so this is from our example. This is what you will do. So I'm going to just walk through this, and then if you get bored later, you can go through these reflection questions. But these are very similar to the ones that we had already looked at. And it's helpful for us to repetitively read these job descriptions with these reflection questions in mind, because then you'll know exactly how to position yourself without too much guessing, which is great. So we have drive business and product decisions based on sound research, conduct foundational research to help Patreon assess and prioritize opportunities across multiple verticals and global markets, plan and conduct research to deeply understand Patreon's users and potential users, communicate insights to evangelize the voice of the user across the company. Okay, for those of you who haven't noticed, this is quite possibly the vaguest list of responsibilities that has ever existed. So what we're going to do is we're going to just hop into it. And I'm going to break down a little bit what they actually mean and how you can show up when something like this exists. Typically, if it's this vague, it may not have actually been written by a hiring manager. And that's a really good question to ask because you don't want to get into an interview without knowing what the job actually is. And this could actually mean lots of different things. And this is also where we start to see a blending of the difference between a UX researcher role from like an associate level and a senior UX researcher role. So drive business and product decisions. Once again, this goes in line with informing your team. So if you're trying to drive product decisions, the best way you can drive a product decision is to put data behind it. And that could be quantitative or qualitative. And that also supports this concept of based on sound research. What does sound actually mean? Sometimes we call it rigorous. Sometimes we call it legitimate or formal. And it's really just doing the research right. And that's going to be demonstrated by any kind of case study that you have or portfolio that you have. Conduct foundational research to help Patreon assess and prioritize opportunities across multiple verticals and global markets. And this one I really struggle with because this is in the very big gray area of that's not what UX research actually is. That's more of a market research type of role. And so that's something to think about a lot, actually. So it's something to ask about, to clarify. Plan and conduct research to deeply understand Patreon's users and potential users. What does deeply understand actually mean? Well, let's break it down. So you have what your users do, how they do it, and then why they do it. So deeply understanding is directly tied to why your customers behave in a specific way. So if you can demonstrate that, good to go. Communicate insights, excuse me, communicate insights and evangelize the voice of the user across the company. So This one's kind of fun. No one actually knows what it means. Communicate insights. That could be in a report. It could be in a website, whatever. Doesn't really matter how. What's important to note when someone's asking about communication is recognizing that different people on your team are going to care about different things, and give them an example of how you might have communicated a design spec to an engineer versus design spec to a stakeholder. Stakeholders like to talk in numbers. What is this going to result in? Engineers speak more in technical capabilities. That same goes for researchers. So, you know, researchers have to talk to stakeholders. They have to talk to the strategists, the designers, the engineers. How can you talk to them differently? By just acknowledging the fact that they communicate, that each group communicate differently. That's all you have to say. Like, don't say, I wrote reports. That tells you nothing. So think about that. And then evangelize the voice of the user. So yeah, this is a big one. I'm still trying to figure out what this actually means, but it's really just communicating the value of UX research to a specific instance or initiative. So if you can have a specific example of, hey, we did this project with this outcome, we told it to this stakeholder, and this was the response. And this is what we did to like make sure everyone was on the same page. It's all about getting everyone on the same page. Cool. All right. How are we doing? Gut check. Is everyone like feeling okay? Is everyone awake? Cool. All right. Actually, I just saw a point in the chat that's really important that I want to call out with this evangelize. It's very much a possible red flag that if you start seeing evangelize in job descriptions, do your homework, because that could very possibly mean that they have a very immature UX research practice or UX practice in general, and 90% of your job is going to be convincing people that you should still be there. We can definitely, I think I might start a Clubhouse chat just to talk about evangelizing UX, but stay tuned for that. Okay, I'm gonna go through this really fast. And if anyone has questions, other questions, feel free to hit me up. I could talk about this for days, but I do want to be like, make sure everyone gets here on time, and we still have quite a bit to get through. So we have our preferred qualifications, and it basically tells us what they're really hoping for additional added value beyond like the bare minimum of what it takes to do the job. So what they're looking for is a strategic placement of, we could possibly use this skill in the future. That is why we're asking for this. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to use it in your immediate role. So that's why we need to care. Once back to this concept of, if we understand the outcome and we can demonstrate how we got to that specific outcome without that actual qualification or skill, it still positions you in a way where you can get the job done. You just have to connect the dots for the hiring manager, because the hiring manager isn't, they don't want to think. They just want to know that you can, in fact, deliver on these outcomes that you're promising. I did see a question about these preferred qualifications and if they're red flags. Yes and no. So no, as in it's kind of telling to show you like how serious they feel about the role, both in a positive way and in a negative way. If they have literally the longest like laundry list of preferred qualifications that have nothing to do with the actual role, don't try to match yourself to that, because then they will expect that, and that's just like a really not great job. So pick the ones that make the most sense for the job that you want to do and highlight that. All right, so this is the bonus points, preferred qualifications that we're looking at. Some of these are really straightforward, which is nice. So I'll just jump into this piece here. Conduct research in languages other than English. Okay, guys, that does not mean you have to speak French. It just means that maybe you've worked with a translator. Maybe you've coordinated research in other countries. Those are things you can highlight. How can you get to the outcome without
Hey,
the specific skill?
I think you need to switch slides.
Oh yeah, hi, there we go. Sorry guys. You can tell I'm on like one slide deck with my notes and another slide deck for the rest of you guys. So if that happens again, please, please, please let me know. All right, so we have this ability to conduct research in other languages other than English. We just talked about that. That's the outcome that they're looking for. How you get to it depends on how creative you are. A background in behavioral science and experimentation. This
Can you go
ties
back
to,
one slide, please? There's multiple people asking.
yeah, absolutely. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so this was where we were. Cool. So this was the preferred qualifications that we had just talked about. So these are what they're called. So the differentiators, nice to haves, bonus points if. And then what does it tell us? So what they're really hoping for is this additional value. It's more of a strategic hire. So they think of like, okay, in the future, like in the next year and a half, we want this capability. It would be really helpful if this person had this capability now so they can grow into a future role, that type of thing. And like I had mentioned before, like with this warning of the nice to haves. So if you start to see these massive laundry lists or nice to haves that have nothing to do with the actual role. So if someone's asking, if it's a design role and they're asking for you to code, be really careful how you position yourself with that. Doesn't make you less desirable as a candidate, especially since you're going to be a better fit for yourself. If you don't want to code, like if you don't want to code as like a primary part of your job, don't highlight that part. So we're going to just go ahead and skip through this. Once again, these are the reflection questions that would be really helpful if you guys kind of walk through. And then this was where I totally left you guys. Apologize for that. Thanks for sticking with me. Okay, so we already talked about research in another language, the background in behavioral science. So this is, what does background actually mean? Is it an advanced degree? Is it an X amount of years? How I would perceive that, I'm not this hiring manager. I have not been inside of their head. But how I would read into that is some sort of demonstrated pattern of exercising behavioral science and experimentation. So whether that's through formal education or through like specific examples throughout the course of your career, that's what you want to be looking for or highlighting. Expertise in, what does expertise mean? Technically, if you're an expert, you have over 10,000 hours of work with this. The likelihood of someone having 10,000 hours of expertise in survey, but also like are doing all these things, very small. So take it with a grain of salt. That's all I have to say. Previous experience working on two-sided marketplaces. So that's pretty straightforward. Previous experience, maybe it was a single client, maybe it was a previous job. Maybe you are a member of a two-sided marketplace. So for those of you who don't know, two-sided marketplaces are like anywhere where the buyer and the seller on a website are both customers of the company. It's like an Etsy, anywhere you sell anything on, that kind of thing. And then a passion for, so passion's a really good opportunity to bring in a personal experience. Like that is an invitation to bring in a personal experience and to make that connection. Okay, qualifications. So what does it tell us? It tells us how this company defines qualified, and that can be very telling within itself. Once we understand what their benchmarks are and why they care, which is once you connect the qualifications to their problem statement, we can start to understand like, how does it work? How does it come together? We can better understand the creative workarounds to make up for the skills and the capabilities we may not necessarily have. It also helps us understand how mature their practice is. So we've all seen this. They actually break it out for the user in the senior researcher role. We have more fun words like working with a great degree of autonomy. It means you probably won't have a mentor and you're going to be really good at Googling things, comfortable prioritizing across multiple teams. You might be pulled in lots of different directions. Once again, if you can demonstrate how you've worked on multiple teams before or have been a shared asset across teams before, it's a really good thing to bring up here. All right, so in the next 9 minutes, I realized that was a lot in a very short period of time. So thank you for hanging in there, guys, real MVPs. So how do we bring this all together? So we have, with practice, we'll have a pretty good idea of what the job description is actually asking for. And now it's time to translate your experiences to align with what these requests are. So we're going to do this exercise like express. So if you have a job description, grab it now. And what I want you to do is highlight the skills and experiences that are being asked for. So both literally and between the lines. And I would say probably skip the overview for this exercise, just jump right into any type of roles and responsibilities and qualifications. And I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do that. And to whoever D. Kim is, calling you out, good morning. So what we are doing right now is we're taking that job description that we mentioned at the very beginning of the workshop and circling / highlighting any skills or experiences that you might have or that they're asking for. And then we're going to go through and align them with the skills that you have. And you've got about a minute. Yep. All right. So Now what we're going to do, so we're going to make a quick little table like the one below. And in column A, we're going to list the job description or the skills listed in the job description. And we're going to skip the proficiency part because time, but in the future, you can add the proficiency. And then which I'm pretty sure you have a pretty good idea. So maybe if you are like super strong in it, just put that in there. But don't try to say like, I'm medium at this or I'm low at this. Like if you're super strong, list it. Otherwise, don't worry about it right now. And then an example of how you demonstrated this in the real world. And this is exactly, you can pull this straight from your skills inventory that we did earlier. Now we're just matching what you have from your personal database to the job description, lining it up. I'll give you about a minute to just kind of list it all out. All right, so now this is all just a cross comparison at this point. So what we want to do is, taking a look at our skills, where our strengths exist in our skills. And this is, if you want to follow the exercise step by step, later on when you have the time and the space to go all out on this, the instructions are here. But for tonight, we are going to jump right into creating our solution statements. So what we need to do before we jump into that is prioritize what the needs are from the job description. And so how we do that is how frequently does it come up in the description? How many skills are related to that specific ask? So if they're asking for example, your research example, conduct foundational research and conduct generative research and conduct whatever, usability testing, like it's being able to plan and execute and analyze research, like that's the skill. So think about it that way. And then what you want to do is kind of compare their needs to the proficiency of the skills that you have and the ones that cross, that align. So like say in this job description that we just went through, like they really need a good communicator and they need someone who really knows how to conduct foundational research and whatever. And you're super strong at communicating and you're kind of medium at conducting research, you can still highlight those two, right? Because it's a big ask that they have and you can still show up. And then there's like your superstar skills that you have that you can highlight that they are also asking for. So the closer you can get that alignment, the stronger your application is going to be. So that's prioritizing, and that helps us understand how are we going to create these solution statements. So I'm going to give you an example, and this was briefly alluded to at the beginning of the workshop. It's essentially how can we take this statement that they're asking for, this was pulled from the example that we walked through, and turn it into that formula of here is a skill that I have, let me show that I have it, and here is the outcome. So that's one approach that you can take, or you can mirror the the actual statement from the job description. So this is an example, and I'm going to walk you through it, just so you can see what I mean, because it is a little bit lofty. So this is the thing that they said: you will bring a strong foundation in UX research methods, flexibility, and the ability to help teams drive towards decision making. And so this was my response. Through the design, execution, and analysis, showing that foundation of facilitated interviews, ongoing surveys, and unmoderated usability testing, I was able to provide various depths of readily available behavioral insights. So that's showing flexibility, and corresponding recommendations to inform design decisions. That is a wallop of a sentence, but it highlights multiple skills in one sentence. So instead of having 12 bullet points, one impact statement. So you're meeting them right where they are. You're showing, they're asking about your foundation in research, how flexible you are, and how you inform teams, or like how do you help teams make decisions. And just for our visual folks in the room, I kind of broke it out to match. This was the ask, this was my answer to that. And that's something that you want to, as you're building these solution statements, think about. So what are they asking you? What is their need? They need someone who really knows UX research. Okay, well, how can I quickly demonstrate a variety of different foundations of UX research and methods? So that's what I did. I answered that verbatim. And then next to flexibility. So I provide various depths of readily available insights, so the team can pull at them whenever they want to, and corresponding recommendations to inform design decisions. So the ability to help teams drive towards decision making. I'm giving them recommendations and I'm giving them information to help inform those designs. So that's how I'm showing up. So that's essentially how we do this. And then with these you answered, you can actually start building out like a database, so to speak, or a repository full of these statements, because you'll notice if you're looking for a similar kind of role, you hear it all the time, like, I applied to 100 different jobs, but it's like, are you just throwing your resume in the winds, or are you actually hearing what they're asking for and showing up in a very specific way? And then you'll notice a lot of the asks are very similar. So you can create these hyper-personalized statements, just save them in an Excel doc, and you can start pulling them and start crafting your own resume and your own cover letter with these specific statements. No need to reinvent the wheel. So if someone's asking you, like, you're an expert collaborator. Okay, well, you have 3 examples of how you used your self skills, your people skills, and your organizational skills to collaborate. Done. So as you can see, it starts to become a little bit of a system where you can continuously build upon and pull from as you move forward in your job hunts. All right. So last but not least, so something to think about when we're going through all of this. So it essentially, like I mentioned, demonstrates to the hiring manager that you've actually heard them and you're able to think critically about what they need and what some viable solutions are, which is you. It also keeps you aligned and aware of your own skills. So if you're going through this like skills gap and you're starting to notice like 6 of the 8 job descriptions you looked at are asking for this one specific thing, maybe it's time to go learn about it. And then the last but not least is just, assessing job applications and going through this process. It feels big, especially when you're just starting. This is the first time you've seen this, but you can go through this whole exercise of assessing a job description and matching your skills to what they need in less than 10 minutes. And then you have this like super tailored application that's really going to set you apart from the masses. All right. Oops. Give me 1 second here. So what I want you to do, I'm gonna try to keep this under 10 minutes. So I want you guys to go pull, it says top 3, but let's do just your top one skill that you feel like aligns with your job description and aligns with one of your personal strengths, and just take a stab at going through and creating your own solution statement. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes. All right. So who wants to share? Same thing, if you have something that you feel good about, just put me in the chat. Anyone? I think I scared you guys. Or do we need another minute?
Maybe another minute.
Okay. It's the final home stretch. So once this is done, you guys are free. All right. How are we feeling? Good, I think. Awesome. Cool. Anyone want to share? And that's totally fine if you don't. I get that it's late. I'm more than happy to take a look at anything after this call too, if you go kind of explore this. All right, go for it. D. Kim.
Okay. I don't have a video, but I'll just tell what my
Totally fine.
statement is. So the job description entail was ability to embrace collaboration with all team members, including product, project, and development team members, as well as UX colleagues. So the, I guess, solution statement that I provided was, I'm able to effectively attain, clarify requirements from project / project managers, collaboratively design and solutionize with peer designers, and host kickoff design events with developers to ensure smooth handoffs and deliverables.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the only thing that I might suggest is lead with the skill and not I. So through whichever skill you want to highlight first, and then go into that mirroring statement. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah,
as
it's
you
kind of,
can see, it's like a little catchphrase there.
yeah, absolutely. Cool. Awesome. Well, you guys are all champions, absolutely. So thank you so much for sticking with us to the end. Thank you for sharing that statement. And like I said, if anyone's interested or wants an extra pair of eyes on any solution statement that you have, send it my way. And so one last thing before we hop off. So you guys, I saw like all your questions, and we're not hopping off, we're hopping into questions, but whatever, before we hop into questions. I did see a lot of questions in the chat about how does this look on my resume and how do I connect a few more experiences and how does that actually translate into my overall application. And I've heard so many pain points and challenges. As some of you know, I host free office hours on Thursdays, so anyone can sign up for a 20-minute conversation with me. I've looked at hundreds of resumes and cover letters and have gone through these kinds of exercises with folks to really help create applications that pack a punch. But through those conversations, I learned that there's just a significant need to kind of understand what is the total package and how do we bring this all together and how can we position ourselves to like either break into our first UX job. And I apologize for the sirens, but how do I break into my first UX job? How do I actually position what I have to bring to the table? Like, do I need to go get all these skills before I can even apply? And as you can see, can start to see through this very brief, but also at the same time, long exercise, there are a lot of parallels that exist in our lives that we don't necessarily pay attention to, and bringing some awareness to that and highlighting that is something that I'm really passionate about. So as I alluded to at the beginning of this workshop, this was a very short version. There's actually a full-length course that I teach. We'll be getting ready to launch here in about a week. So very excited about all of that. So if anyone is interested in learning more about how to bring this all together and also like interviewing boot camps, so like going through multiple interviews, how to interview with a portfolio, how to interview with a hiring manager versus leadership, how to, do you have to write a cover letter? If you do, what do you put the cover letter in? There are a lot of questions about the job application, but also just positioning yourself in personal branding. And so it's going to be a live course taught by me. So we'd be hanging out once a week for a little bit and going through a lot of exercises, like the full length version of these exercises, spending some time, but also having a lot of really good conversation around it. And it's just going to be a lot of fun to hang out in the community. So if you're interested, I'm going to post a link in the chat for anyone who is curious to learn more. This is not a commitment, like you're not signing up for anything. If you click on the link, it's just going to be like, what's your name? What kind of things are you hoping to learn about? Because we're still working on finishing the content, and that's something that an opportunity we'd love to invite you to come hang out with us and talk about this more. So I'm going to post that here. And if anyone is interested, please feel free. Like I said, it's not a commitment, it's just learning more. And I'm really excited to continue to work with you. And that is it. So, Lene, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add before we move to questions.
No, but I have been keeping track of some of the questions. So do you want me to just try to ask some of these?
Let's do it.
Cool. Okay, first question. This was asked a while ago. Some of these might not make a lot of sense because they may have gone with your presentation, but we'll try to get through it.
Okay.
So the first one was, I received feedback that my skill list was at different levels, like tools, people, etc. Any advice for preferred level regarding resume and first contact?
That's interesting. I feel like I have a few qualifying or clarifying questions regarding that. If whoever asked that question would love to kind of explain a little bit more about what they mean by different levels.
Let's see, who was that?
They're still on the call.
Was that me? I'm sorry, I got distracted, but I asked a question about different levels on the resume.
Okay.
So if it was me, then I'll go ahead and ask. So just not so much with your statement descriptions, but more with when you're like listing key skills. I got feedback recently that it wasn't so good to have things that were at these different, like you described them as levels, like, you know, people skills versus like concrete, you know, craftsmanship skill sets. And I don't know if it was just that my balance of those things was off, or if you really should skew one way or another, or if it depends on the level of the role. But I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, so typically when you're looking at the tool section on your resume and any kind of list, keep it to your hard skills. So those are going to be your tools that you're familiar with, and those, the body of knowledge and like any other languages that you know. So that's, if you're looking at the list, absolutely. Like I would say I could probably align with that feedback. But when we start thinking about presenting yourself as the whole package, like why we're looking at the whole spectrum of skills, it's incorporating them within the actual text of your resume and how you present how you've used those tools. So a hiring manager does want to look and see, like, do they know JavaScript or do they know X, especially if it's a more technical role. But when it comes to the other skills, those are the ones that you can bake into like your resume and your cover letters and how you talk about it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thanks.
Awesome.
I don't know if Christina, she's not on the call anymore, but I don't know if she was asking this to like rhetorically, but she asked, how are you brief when that is not your skill set?
How are you what?
How to be brief when that's not your skill set. I think she probably talks a lot.
Oh man, I have no idea.
That's hard, right?
I'm sure there's a class on it. How to be concise. I don't know. I should probably take that. I can be a little long-winded. But.
Let's see. Would it be helpful to create multiple resumes that highlight different sets of skills?
Okay, so I have thoughts on that. I used to do that where depending on the role that I had, like I had a set of 4 or 5 different resumes that I would pull. What I found is easier is take your skill set, like we literally just did it, where it's like, here are the skills in order to, with the outcome, those are your bullet points that you put on your resume, right? So under each job. And so if you have an Excel sheet that has all of these different skills and all these different experiences, you read the job description, match it up, and just pull from the database to build out your resume based on what the role is. So instead of having like a bunch of different resumes, just like have a template for your resume that you can kind of just add in those particular experiences. And that's why doing the legwork ahead of time is going to save you so much time. And so when you do get that job, like that job that you've been for a company that you're really excited about, you can get in really fast because you're not spending 4 days like trying to craft your resume. Like you already have it. You just got to put it together.
I love that so much. When you said a spreadsheet earlier or something about coming up with these sentences, I thought of that and I was just like, wow, what a great idea. Like that is so cool. And I never would have thought of that.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second because my computer's about to die on everybody.
It's totally fine.
It's like a race. Okay.
You're nailing it.
Okay. Anyways, next question. But yeah, love the idea. That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Let's see. Some job descriptions have qualifications and then bonus points. What are your thoughts on the role and value of bonus points items? I think you kind of talked about this, but
yeah, a little bit. And it's just really pay attention to what they're asking for. So like if they're asking for a job where it's like you're a UX designer and your day-to-day job is to design things and you're less on the strategic side and you're not really managing, and then nice to have, it's a PhD, the likelihood of you actually needing that PhD for that job is going to be slim. So I would just focus on making the connection between those nice to haves and those bonus points. And if there's any workaround that you have for that, great. Like parallel skills are beautiful things, and they're things that I think are overlooked. So folks will be like, well, I don't have experience with Figma, but I have experience with Sketch. And I mean, tomato, tomato, right? So like I can still knock out a wireframe in 10 minutes. Like those are the kinds of things that you should be thinking about when you're looking at those nice to haves.
Oh. All right. Oh, this is a great one. I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but it's a heated discussion. I'm just going to ask it anyways to see what
let's go.
So any answer for why entry-level positions typically require 5 years of experience?
Can we have a Clubhouse chat about this? Like with wine? Because I feel like that's... So typically with like 3 to 5 years of experience, they're looking for a lot of different things, right? But the biggest one being, it straight up says, we don't have a budget to train you. Like we're not going to sit you down and like train you. Like show us that you have a multifaceted set of skills that can really show up in a big way. So that being said, if you're trying to run it through some sort of like ATS or like any type of automatic resume program, they're going to automatically kick you out. I did also see a question about like, how would you incorporate like these skills to optimize for that? And this is just tough love, but UX is too competitive of a field to not know somebody for the job that you're applying for. If you are at the mercy of like, if you don't have a personal contact that you can reach out to and ask questions and like make yourself known, shouldn't even waste your time like putting that application together. If you can't take it the extra step to go on LinkedIn and stalk some people for a minute and find someone who's somewhat related to the role of job and ask like, hey, what's going on with this? Like, what can you tell me? Like, I would love to just 20 minutes, whatever, like help me understand what this process is. If you can't make a physical connection with a company, especially ones where you see like applications are like over 100, don't worry about optimizing. Like spend your time finding somebody in the company to talk to. But that's just me.
That's me too. I agree. I don't really apply to anything really because I only apply to jobs where I know someone or I can find someone, a
Yep.
human. So the amount of jobs that I've applied to is pretty low, but I think that I probably have had more success that way. Just, I know like in a past career, I would spend many hours applying to everything and then never getting calls and just getting discouraged and annoyed and wanting to, and I ended up switching my career back then too because of that, because I spent like a year doing that. So yeah, I would suggest not getting burned out with those kinds of things. But that's just me too. I know people have different strategies.
Quality over quantity, but what do I know?
Yeah. Well, I like this intentional process of spending your energy on intentional things and getting better results that way than just, you know, spending all that energy on things that are probably not going to be very successful. So I think your program is super great. I'm really excited to go through all of this again and you know, figure out my solution statements.
We'll get you there.
I think the last question, I don't know if you really want to talk about this or not, but we just want to know your thoughts on cover letters, another topic. What do you think about those?
So this is how I like to use cover letters. Cover letters for me are if you've made a contact in a company for a job that you want, but they're not a direct hiring manager. The cover letter is something to give that contact to give the hiring manager. That's how I see it, where it's like, and you're not throwing a resume at them. It's just like a, hey, it's almost like a warm introduction. And for me, as someone who's been in the hiring like manager's shoes and has hired for teams, first of all, if it asks for a cover letter and you don't give one, like if they give you an opportunity to give a cover letter and you don't give one, come on, like, do you even want to work here? But if they do send a cover letter, first of all, spend your time on it, because sometimes they can do more harm than good if it's just there because you did it. If it makes you sound like a zombie potato, like just don't worry about it. Like if it doesn't have a little spice to it, like, and show your personality, because that's the point. The point is to show your personality in it. So keep that in mind. But if it's a cover letter and it shows your personality and it's not required and you give it anyways, I'm going to give that application so much more attention because they've given me the attention already. Like they've shown up in a big way, which captures my attention.
I have heard this from a few people that recruiters don't read cover letters, but hiring managers do. So that's why they suggest always including that, just because you never know, like if you get past the recruiter, the hiring manager will most likely look at that. So that I think are really good suggestions. All right, well, I think that's all the questions. Did anyone else want to throw another question in there or just ask Kate directly real quick right now before we do some networking? Going once, going twice. Oh, here we go. What is a typical day like as a UX designer? Oh my goodness, Sonia, you're going to love our next, I think it's our next one. Yes, it's in March with Jackie. She is going to tell us all about that topic, the typical day in life as a UX designer, and so much more. So I think that's going to be really great. I don't know, Kate, if you want to touch on that.
I mean, I don't know if I can really speak to being a UX designer because I am not a UX designer. I could give you a lowdown of what a typical day in the life of a UX researcher is if anyone's interested.
I mean, if you want to go there, I mean, I know you don't have all night, so like,
yeah,
you know,
it's
a couple things.
Mostly just a lot of emails and a lot of expletives. So no, it's it really depends on the kind of work that you're doing. But I would say, hold on, there's a real question. I might divert this answer to answer this. Jeremy, you're my hero. Okay. Do you list skills on a resume that you are familiar with or only those you really know how to do? Okay. That's a really great question. I would say if you can't provide that skill in order to, with an outcome with that skill, then I would say don't put it on there. But if you did it one time and you had and you had this really good application and you had an outcome, absolutely put it on there. And then in the interview, you can say like, yeah, I did that. It's not something I do all the time, but I did, and that's what happened. So keep that in mind. Like if you can't put that statement together with the skill that you have, then you shouldn't, it's not a skill because you aren't able to create an outcome, and that's the definition of a skill.
I have a follow-up to that.
Yeah.
So for outcomes, if you don't necessarily have like that ROI, like hard number kind of outcome, how would you approach that? Like, can you still say to do this one thing, or I learned this one thing about that, or like, how would you approach that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think anytime someone says outcome, they immediately go to ROI. And I don't know what that's all about because ROI is just the end result of a series of outcomes. So the outcome is actually take a step back. And so for example, like the wireframing example, like I used Figma to create prototypes that informed design or that whatever fueled user research. Fueled user research is the outcome. So it doesn't have to be quantitative. It's always good though to have a balance on your resume of non-quantitative and some quantitative outcomes if you have them, which they're hard to get, especially like when I was at Publicis Sapient, we were on these super cool projects that like fueled a portfolio for days, but we handed it off and we didn't get to see what the client did with it. So we had no way to know like, what is the outcome? Well, we sent it to the client and they didn't sue us. Like that's the outcome like that we have for this. So that's.
They were happy. That's an outcome.
Yeah. Or like, like I worked on an app redesign and I just went to the app store and I'm like, and now it's used by 4.3 million people. Like that could be an outcome. I mean, doesn't mean that they liked it, but they're using it. So like that's a way to think about it. Like you can kind of get creative around what those outcomes actually look like.
Cool. All right, another question. How can you stand out while networking on LinkedIn? I'm an entry to mid-level UX researcher moving to San Diego and trying to get to know UX teams and SD. So far, I haven't had luck with translating it into any job interviews. Victoria, I hope you are part of SDXD and that's how you found us because they're a great group. Just wanted to throw that plug in there.
I am. Hi, guys.
Hello. Okay, this is a really big question. So I guess, are you trying to stand out or are you trying to be like trying to get interviews? Because those are two very different things.
I guess I'm trying to like introduce myself to like strangers and communicate my like passion and experience and trying to get that to lead into an interview. And I feel like I like have received a lot of mentoring, which is super valuable, but it hasn't led to anything like tangible.
Okay, so it's a really long-winded question because it's less about standing out on LinkedIn and more about balancing, activating, and growing your network, which is a little bit different. I feel like we should talk.
Okay.
Because it is a really big answer, but I guess like as far as getting interviews go, like you don't just meet people and say like and expect an interview to come out of that. Typically, standing out on like the time of effort to fruition on like LinkedIn to like jobs like building that amount of trust to the point where you've met someone on LinkedIn and they're willing to stick their neck out to like refer you to a job is very long. Like you're looking at like year-long plus relationships. So that may not necessarily be your best route. Because if you're trying to get interviews, the best way is to position yourself as like the ideal candidate, right? And then find someone in the company and start talking to them and be like, hey, like, I'm interested in your company. Tell me more about it. Okay, I saw this role. Are you open to having a conversation with me about it? And if they say no, then just say, great. Would you still be willing to like talk to me later on down the road about working at your company? Like, right? So you want to just keep feeding that like notion of like, hey, I'm interested and let me know more, and maybe you can try someone else at another company. So it's all about finessing and building. It's like relationship selling essentially, but you have to build the relationships first before you can ask for anything. And that's why I think LinkedIn as a means to like, if you're trying to focus so much on output, like establish yourself as a thought leader, etc. The returns on that take a very long time. Like it's not something that you're just going to meet someone and overnight that connection is going to happen.
That makes sense.
Jeremy says he gets ghosted every time he tries this. And I just want to say, Jeremy, I totally feel your pain. I know I get ghosted all the time too, but today I did not. Keep doing it. And I will talk to somebody in a company about a job. I don't know if it's not an interview, but I get to hear about what they're looking for and, you know, how I can position myself a little bit better when I apply to this job. So I'm looking
That's awesome. So to Jeremy, I would be really curious about what your approach is. Like, what is your messaging when you're like reaching out to folks? You don't have to share with the group, but it's something to think about. Yeah.
So I guess, so there was a job post for Patagonia, clothing company that I was applying to. And like, I tried to do what they say, like look for people in the job and reach out. And like, I reached out to people all I wanted to know was the name of the hiring, because it wasn't listed. It was like
the name of the hiring manager.
I couldn't find out who this person would be to try to like do initiative and like directly name them on the cover letter and that kind of stuff. So just no one responded, you know. But it happens here and there where people do want to help, but you know, it's like if you go straight, your first thing with them is, how can you help me? Like, how do you go about reciprocating or establishing, like, if you're trying to get this job that's posted, you don't have like months to build up a rapport, you know. Like, how do you build up that relationship and also find out about the job you're trying to apply for, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is kind of tricky, right? Where like if you can't find the hiring manager, but I mean, the best you can do is reach out, but it's all about how you kind of message it, right? So I like when I reach out, and this is just me, like how I've done in the past, like I like to say like, hey, like I'm Kate, I'm a user. I reach out to people all the time and I'm just like, hey, I'm a user researcher. I'm really interested in like these specific things that are relevant to the job description. I'm curious, like, would you ever like let me pick your brain about, you know, how this is done there? So that way it's more like starting a conversation versus like this expectation of like them giving you anything. It's like, hey, like I'm really interested in eco-friendly clothing, whatever, like whatever, like outdoor sports. So let's talk about it sometime. That's a way that you can do it, but also that does take time. So like building those relationships. Something that's kind of fun to do if you're bored is finding the companies that you want to work for, and then just start finding people with connections and just kind of work your connections up until you have like 1 or 2 in the company. And then it makes you look just a little less out of left field when you start applying for a job that becomes available. But once again, these all take time. Like that's what's kind of challenging, is any type of relationship building and interviewing does. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes you're LNA and they just open up their loving arms.
Okay, that never happens to me, one. And 2, I also knew like 3 other people in the organization already, and they just didn't know the hiring manager or who it was. So they just put me in the right direction. And I think that's why that person was more receptive to talking to me, because I had already talked to other people that I knew, that I've been cultivating this relationship for 2 years now. So, I mean, it's taken a long time. I mean, it's not like this is something I just did and got lucky one day. Been 2 years of trying to cultivate a relationship with this company. So yeah. It's a lot. But
If no one else has a question, I have one more thing, if I can. So I'm taking a course, and it's kind of a generalist prep for UX UI, and but I mean, honestly, I kind of would rather just like be a UI designer, and that's just like aligns with my personality and my background and my natural skill and all that stuff. I just like it more too. It's more fun, but like that doesn't mean like I'm taking this broad course to understand the full cycle. So how do I market myself for something that I want to do and show that I know the full scope without appearing like I'm trying to be a UX designer or a generalist? Like, you know what I mean? Because it's like a wide berth. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I don't know how to
absolutely.
go. I mean, am I crazy for even trying to start out to be a UI designer and specialist, or should I start like in this field as start as a generalist?
I mean, I think we're all a little bit insane, but it's fine. We kind of just figure it out as we go. And but to your point, that's a really good question. And I feel like some of us in the room have had experiences where their existing experience is greatly influencing the opportunities that are coming through the door, just because the way that their previous experience tells the story, because it tells you where you've been and not where you want to go. So I'm a big fan of not putting everything on my resume. And I may not even put that, like the course title is like generalist, like UX generalist. Like I probably would not even put that on your resume, and then just start like, okay, what are the skills are you good at, and how does the job align? Just kind of like what we went through. So to position yourself for where you want to go. So you leverage what you like. If you've learned something from your generalist course about something specific to just UI design, pull that out and highlight that. And then you can say, I also have a pretty good idea of like how the ecosystem works because I took this course once, like whatever. Like, and it doesn't have to be a highlight. It can just be something that supports the actual skill that you're trying to highlight, which is like UX universal awareness, which is good. Like everyone needs to know how all the pieces fit together because it's kind of a well-oiled machine, supposedly. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I have a weird mix of things. Like I tried a coding boot camp and it just wasn't for me, but I do have like a sort of interest in like understanding the HTML and CSS and the front end stuff a little bit more intimately than probably the average person, but not enough to be a Fed. So like, I don't know. I mean, I know code, it's a big argument, right? Like designers shouldn't code or some should, you know, it's like a 50-50 split. So I mean, you can't put that in my portfolio.
Yeah, if you don't want to code, don't say you can code.
Well, no, like, I'm like I have the desire to maybe like learn it to be a better designer. Like,
Yeah,
I'm just gonna-
absolutely. And that's totally fair to leverage. But to your point, like hiring managers, especially if they put like, do you know how to code in the job description? Well, it's a distractor from what you actually want to be doing. Like they'll hone in on that and be like, yes, this guy. And then all of a sudden, like you're going to spend more time exercising a skill that you may not have the biggest strength in or the most desire to do because it's a covetable skill. It's something that's like, oh, like now we don't have to hire this coding intern. We can just have Jeremy do it.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Thank you for all those personal questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I think we're going to try to wrap this up and just go into the networking portion. And I don't know if Kate, you still have time to stick around for a little bit. I know it's getting kind of late where you are. But we'll be chatting in some breakout rooms with Kate and some of these other questions that you might have. Maybe she can answer then. So let's just take like a 5-minute break and then come back and I'll put everyone in some breakout rooms and we'll continue the conversation. Oh, and this would be a great time to drop off if you don't want to come back for the networking. Then we won't be putting people in breakout rooms that aren't actually there. So feel free to drop off now. I will put the recording up on our meetup page and also sending that email out with the slides as well. So you'll have all of that information in the next few days. I'll see you in 5 minutes for anyone who wants to stick around.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. going to attempt to put everyone in breakout rooms now, and we'll see you in a little bit. Let's see. Is it working?
I think there's only 7 people, so maybe
Oh,
we
well
don't need
then
breakout rooms.
we should just have one room then.
Oh, let's stop recording too.